G'day guys, AOS Coach here, and in this video we are going to look at a tournament recap of Brizhammer Chaotic. It was a tournament that happened at the start of May 2021 up in Brisbane. It was put on by the Brizhammer lads. Shout out to Chris Stratford or Stratty, who was the tournament organizer, and put on, it was about 60 odd players. It was about a 90-minute flight from my home, and I'd been to a Brizhammer tournament in the past, and they always put on a cracking event. A couple of things to consider here is, one, I took my sons again, so off the back of a 4-1 performance over at Vic GT, I thought I'd take them out for a spin to see how they go at Brizhammer. Now, a couple of things that were interesting about Brizhammer. First, Brizhammer was going to be set in the realm of Ulgu. So the entire event was going to be set in a particular realm, and that could be pros and it could be cons. We didn't quite know how my sons would respond. But second, and probably the biggest impacts, was that as I previously mentioned, the event was called Chaotic. And one of the things that was going to be a part of this particular event was that there was going to be no Grand Alliance prizes other than for Chaos. So the event wasn't really skewed towards Chaos, but if you wanted one of the trophies, ignoring first, second, and third, but if you wanted the best Chaos, which was the only Grand Alliance tournament available, you had to run Chaos. So this potentially was going to skew the tournament, and potentially what was going to happen was we might see a lot more Chaos or a lot more armies preparing to counter Chaos. Some interesting things was that there were 10 Archaons at the event, which was pretty crazy when you think about the fact that it was a 60-player event. I think there was about 20 Chaos armies in total. It was equal at most represented. So there was about 20-odd Order armies, 20-odd Chaos armies, some Death, and 4 Destruction armies, and there was one of basically each. So there was, I think, one Orc, or one Auric, or 2 Auric. Then there was an Ogre army, and then the Sons. So I was the only Sons here. But like Vic GT, I literally took the same army. I thought it was working really well for me, so I took the Sons of Behemat, and you can see here on the screen, double Gatebreaker, had a Kraken Eater, I had the unit of 3 Man Crushers. So it was really interesting to see how this army would go under some of the conditions. Some of the scenarios were a little bit different as well. So without further ado, we are going to look at the different rounds as per the last tournament recap. I will put my opponents, I'll share a little bit about what we went through in the tournament, and then I will give you a bit of a recap from my opponents. So we'll kind of get a bit of a blend to see what happened. So kicking things off, I was up against Gary. Gary is a tournament regular and puts on a really cool event up in Toowoomba, and we were playing round 1 Star Strike. So Gary was running Ossiarch Bone Reapers with the Staliac Lords, and you can see here that basically it's a little bit of an interesting build. I had never played a Staliac Lords outside of the Murder Pony. So you normally take your Death Riders, but this was going to have a super fast Nagash, and it was going to start buffing up those Mortek Guard in addition to the Immortus Guard. It was an interesting build. I'd probably never seen this type of style before. It's certainly been a while since I saw the Mortis Guard. But to give you a bit of an understanding of what happened, so we were playing Star Strike. We knew the objectives were going to come down. We didn't quite know when and how and where. And I had outdropped Gary. I got the Triumph, which was really great. You know, for me, I was thinking about how do I handle Nagash without dealing with Nagash. So knowing that Nagash wouldn't be able to win the game alone, my objective was really to take out everything else so that I just keep scoring as much as possible. So I outdropped Gary, and I gave him first turn, and, you know, he threw a couple of spells. He put the spell portal out with Nagash. He started to move towards the objective, but didn't actually know where the objective was going to go in turn 1. So there was no real urgency for us to get into the middle and start throwing down, knowing that Star Strike, the objective would drop in the second turn. So really we were setting up and hopefully get a good jump on that. But anyway, Gary started throwing some spells around, as you expect from Nagash, put up Spell Portal, put up the Mortal Contract. So anytime the Kraken Eater would do any damage, so should it do any damage in its shooting, charges, combat, or anywhere that the Kraken Eater with the Mortal Contract would do any damage, it would potentially take D3 mortal wounds. So that was quite damaging and potent when you thought about, I've only got like 4 real units, and if he kept putting out these mortal contracts, I'd be hurting myself, reducing my damage potential from the I guess all the Gargants as they started to degrade. Anyway, Gary took first. He moved around, threw some spells and shenanigans out. I didn't do a lot really in my first turn. I threw some rocks. I didn't do anything with the Kraken Eater. I didn't want to degrade my profile too early. So we were all just kind of preparing for turn 2 and turn 3. So come turn 2, I won priority and I decided to give it away again. I was in a pretty good spot. I thought that, Nagash was going to throw around some spells, and he had his real protection bubble here, so he wasn't doing a lot other than advancing up the board. And he did start scoring those first couple of points early, the center objective. But really, for me, the benefit was understanding and not committing too early, because come turn 3, those objectives would come down both in his territory and my territory. And I didn't want to tie up and commit too much when the objective could be on the other side, and I don't have teleports, I don't have shenanigans. So Gary moved up. He moved up his Bone Reapers to start protecting the objective. He started to prepare to start claiming the objective, and that's literally what happened. In return, and also one big thing that happened here was Gary tried to cast Hand of Dust on my Gatebreaker. Now, luckily for me, I didn't have to worry too much because there was going to be no auto slains. He tried to put that through the spell portal, and luckily for me, he failed. I didn't want to take as much damage, but like I said, luckily with those Mega Gargants, you can't auto slain them. It would just be D6 mortal wounds instead. He moved his forced up. He claimed up the objective in the middle of the board, and I would respond by moving my boys in preparation for turn 3, but also starting to challenge his army. So knowing that he didn't have the Gothazar Harvester, knowing that he only had 1 hero to start regenerating, I charged my Gatebreaker into his 10 Mortek Guard, and I destroyed them as I'd probably expect from a Gatebreaker. Moving into turn 3, I lost the priority roll, and again, Gary threw a bunch of spells around, Drain Vitality, another Mortal Contract on a Gatebreaker, this time the General, and, the objectives were down. So for Gary, he was starting to lose bodies, but he was trying to score as many points as possible, and one thing that really worked in my favor was the fact that the Ossiarch Bone Reapers are generally quite slow. So depending on where the objectives would land, if I would position myself quite well, it means that I would be able to get onto the objective early. My boys are counting as 20. My big boys are counting as 20 on the objective, and he had literally nothing to the size of 20. So I just needed to hold out and score as much as possible. So he was starting to move his army towards the objective slowly. And in response, I would, again, move my boys into combat. My Man Crushers would do 7 mortal wounds on the charge into another block of those Gatebreakers, on the Mortek Guard. And we would start to claim his back objective. So I'd really slung those Man Crushers forward to challenge the back objective while one of my big boys was protecting the home objective. So between the 3, I was starting to score points early, and lots of them early, which put me in a really good spot for turn 4, where, again, I lost the priority roll. And, of course, Gary took it. I was starting to get the lead, and Gary was, moving his boys around and losing bodies. Like, he was losing his bodies quickly. It was coming up to Nagash and really being a potential saver for this army. He really needs some big moves from Nagash to swing it back his way. And unfortunately, I did have a wounded Mega Gargant that was holding an objective, and he set up for the charge with Nagash. He would, if he would have got in, Nagash would have killed the Mega Gargant, and he rolled a double 1. He had no rerolls, and while I would have lost the objective, I was confident I could swing another Mega Gargant back to get it. But really, come turn 4, I had the lead. It was about me defending that role, that lead, and you know, at times not even getting into combat. Like there was no reason at times to get into combat if it meant just holding the objective, and it might mean retreating and moving around and not quite engaging into combat. Come turn 5, I had lost the priority roll again, but as we started doing the maths and you know, a failure from Nagash in turn 4's charge, we quickly realized that even if Gary had maximized and capped all 3 objectives, which were a challenge, and I don't think could have happened, but even if it did, I think, you know, if we worked out statistically, he capped 2 of the 3, there was still not enough victory points in his favor to swing the game in his side. So we went through the combats, but ultimately come turn 5, the game was over and I had secured the major. Probably one other call out here is that the tournament organizer had declared all of the triumphs for their opponents. So everyone played the 2 particular, not triumphs, sorry, secondaries, the auxiliary objectives. So the tournament organizer had set the auxiliary objectives for everybody. So round 1, there was just 2 that everyone were trying to score. So ultimately, I won that match. And yeah, let's hear what Gary had to say about that matchup. G'day, guys. It's round 1. We've just finished. We played what did we play?
Star Strike.
I was going to say Gift to the Heavens, like shit falling out of the sky. I'm here with my opponent, straight out of Toowoomba GT. It is Gary H. Gary, I'm going to butcher your last name, so I'll just say Gary. Gary, tell me about the game. How did it go for you?
Mate, it was great fun. I did better than I expected. I honestly came up to this tournament expecting to just go bombing very, very hard. In the end, it was quite close, I feel. Just that one charge.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I haven't played Nagash for a while, and last time I played Nagash, it was in Petrifix Elite, and your list was quite interesting because I've never really seen the fast OBR without the murder ponies. That was the first time I think I said to you. And
yeah, that's
it's
right.
Been a while since I've seen Immortus Guard. I hadn't seen even the Harbingers. You had Morghast, the Archive. So it was really around bubbling up Nagash and really protecting him. And at the end of the game, I don't think I even put an attack into him.
I think he took 1 wound at one point, but then you just healed up the next round. So yeah, but the rest of the army was dead.
And I think that was, for me, was the strategy. I was like, right, I'm going to take out the Mortec Guard. If I take out the Mortec Guard and the bodies, the chances of me retaining is high, but the damage output for yourself from Nagash was brutal. And those contracts you kept putting on me were, like, I didn't throw any rocks from the Kraken Eater.
That's honestly the first time I've ever used that spell. Normally, the portal is for Hand of Dust, but being Gargants, you're immune to that, so I had to do something else. Yeah,
and I mean, like, you know, you couldn't auto-slay me, which was awesome, but I was really scared that you would use the Mortal Contract, and I would potentially take damage when I shot, when I charged, and I did D3 mortals, D6 mortals on the charge, and then the damage. So there was 3 chances of me taking mortal wounds, and then the machine gun arcane bolt. I thought that could really almost take down the Mega Gargant a turn, and that was my concern.
Yeah,
was that those numbers in combination would just brutalize me.
Yeah, no, I didn't utilize the arcane bolt machine gun enough. I don't think.
You brought it out towards the end.
Yeah,
towards the end, and that's when you started to see some real damage, and the Gatebreaker went down, and that failed charge.
Yes, the 2-inch charge, which I can't reroll, unfortunately.
Any other insights you had from the game, or even like how you played with your army? Because I imagine people who are watching this haven't seen a lot of the things that you've done, and like, you know, the Immortus Guard is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Like, people take Stalkers at best.
Yeah.
At best.
I just wanted to do something different, you know. We're in Realm of Orgu. I was going to bring a Catacross list full of crawlers, so Orgu blocks line of sight, so I figured, right, well, we'll just won't worry about the crawlers at all, and I'll utilise the spell portal with unlimited range, so I'll just go all in the Nagash and build him up with 50 plus wounds.
I dig it. No, it was good. And apologies if you heard the plane just go over there. It was basically them cheering for Gary, saying how amazing he was. It's just unfortunate that a couple of dice rolls, you had some really hot dice rolls.
Yeah.
But then they kind of betrayed you right at the very end.
Yeah, right when I needed it the most.
Good luck. best of luck for the next round.
Thanks, mate.
Hopefully we don't see you again, which is a good thing, because I don't want to deal with Nagash, and you've learnt your lesson.
I'll be hanging down the bottom table.
Nah, you'll be back at the top. You've learnt your lesson, and I imagine your next opponent is going to have a bad time because you're just going to machine gun the crap out of them.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Good luck.
Thanks, mate.
Cool. Turn 2, and I was up against somebody that has been on the channel many times. I respect him as an opponent. He's a great opponent, and that was Ryan Hooper and his Big Wah. This was a concerning one for me because I know that, you know, some of the hard counters that Suns have is facing those faster armies, or in the case of Big Wah, they have a lot of monster hunting abilities, and there was some of these things like the big stabbers, the rogue idol. If you get the double or the triple move spell on them, they can be really fast and really can pack a punch. The lots of bodies there with the savage oryx, and even the gore grunters can be quite fast as well, and you know they can charge me and stop me from charging. So I was a little bit like, this was going to be a hard one, and I was hoping that we could at least have a good game with Hoops. Hoops is a very, very good player as well. So I had still won the deployment. I only had 4 units. Hoops had no battalions, and the 2 secondaries we had to fight for were invaders and for overwhelming. So come turn 1, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to give or take first turn. I felt that if I took first turn, there wasn't a lot to gain. I would get a couple of victory points early, but I knew that if I got doubled, and for some of these things, especially I can pack a real punch, a double from like the Rogue Idol, a double from the Big Stabbers. There was just some things that I was really worried about. So I thought I was going to try to maximize every chance that I could to deal damage, and I gave away first turn. And Hoops had supercharged his Rogue Idol using, I think it was the Cunning Beast Spirits to, if you roll, it doubles the movement and allows them to fly. And if you roll, I think it's a double on the spell cast, actually triples the movement. Luckily for me, there was no triple moving Rogue Idol, but with a good charge move, it did mean that the Rogue Idol was able to actually fly into my backfield and attack my man crushers, a thing that I was trying to protect as much as possible. And I knew this was going to be a tough one, and those big blocks of Oryx and Piggies would just move up the board using their body presence to start zoning me out. And the Rogue Idol in its round of combat ended up doing 34 damage to the man crushers, which would essentially kill 2 of the 3 man crushers and put 1 on 2 wounds left. So I was really lucky to pass the battle shock and keep it around even just to start scoring. But that was a pretty brutal combat. So in response, I charged my 2 gate breakers into the Rogue Idol just because I needed to clear it. I didn't want it around. It might have been an overkill having 2 gate breakers, but at least we had got rid of it. And the Man Crusher retreated from combat. The 2 gate breakers did take down the Rogue Idol threat, but it did mean that the gate breakers did take a little bit of damage. And with the rest of the force coming, I needed every wound that I had, especially with some of the mortal wound output, and again, some of the high damage when in things like the Big Stabbers would attack monsters. Come turn 2, I had won the priority roll and I took it. I used that time to reposition the Mega Gargants and start securing the objective with that wounded Man Crusher. I had to get points on the board. The challenge was that if I didn't score points off this, I'd just be down straight away. But with him, with that wounded Man Crusher, it meant that when I lost the objective, I'd give up even more points. So it was like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. So we move around the table. The 3 Man Crushers tried to do some shooting attacks. I was hoping I could get some battle shock or start reducing thinning the numbers of those 30 Savage Oryx. And between 3 Mega Gargants, I did 1 damage from all of the rock attacks. So there was some straight off fluff, the real fluffy rolls. Hoops would respond by moving up. He'd buff his piggies up. He'd make those big stabbers fly with the cunning beast spirits. He would then charge that injured Mega Gargant, the one that was already damaged from the Rogue Idol, and it would get pulled down. And I was down to like essentially 2 units left. And then I lost priority. The big stabbers went in, took at the Mega Gargant. I was able to pull down the big stabbers, but in return, it left the Mega Gargant on 1 wound. And, by then there was just too much damage being thrown at my Megas, and the rest of them in that turn 3 would just get pulled down by the piggies, the big stabbers when they went out. When they die, they can do some damage on the way out, and then some of the savage oryx and things like that. So, unfortunately for me, the big Wa would get the major victory and in 8-4, but there was no more sons on the table to respond. So so I'm currently now 1 from 1. Hoops, what did you have to say about this?
All right, so round 2's just finished, and I've just got to say I'm with Hoops. Hoops, you probably know off the channel. He's done a bunch of list reviews. But before that, I wish Hoops would have taken me out to dinner before he completely fucked me. Like wine and dine me, at least treat me and cuddle me. But Hoops, take it away. How did you think the game went? What worked? Like, what's your observations?
Yeah, so, honestly, going into that, I think we both sort of knew the outcome, unfortunately. There was a couple things, I really liked how you put your man crushers behind the big three boys at the back there. I thought that was really interesting. Sort of put an idea into my head to throw the Rogue Idol at you from behind, because I know with that spell, I just burn some wild points. Because I get so many with that new list, I can just burn some wild points, definitely get that off because you have nothing to stop me. Get behind you with that 40-inch movement, and then blow them up, and it's a threat that you sort of have to deal with that's already on your objective. So it sort of locked down those couple of at least 2 of them, I think.
Well, yeah, I had to use 2 of my gate breakers just to respond, and I only just killed.
Yeah, it was
only
close,
it was literally the last dice roll, the last damage roll that I killed the Rogue Idol, and then it did damage out on the way out as well. So
3 damage on the way out. Yeah.
So you would soften my belly, and the challenge for me with Gargants is there's no screen. Now you really took advantage of that. You had the stabbers, which were a threat. You had the piggies, which were a threat. The Rogue Idol, which was a threat. And then even if I handled all of that, you still had the savage oryx to deal with it.
120 wounds.
Which even if I cleared through all of those things, there was just all these threats, and you played a really good game.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's a tough list to deal with, especially because there is so many threats, and the fact that those savages can get up to a 2-up save if they're in cover is just you got round 3, but I'm still saving on a 4 or 5-up, depending on where they are, and it's just there's not much you can do, and 2 wounds apiece is a bit shit. But the only thing I'd say that I thought maybe shouldn't have done, you clustered 3 of your big fellas up like that, so I was able to tag the first 2, and there was one behind that couldn't
You're talking about the back of the combat?
Yeah, I don't know if you took a photo of it, but
it was like that, unfortunately, because one, I was trying to defend the objective in a certain way, but 2, because you had done so much damage to some of my Gargants, the line speed kept me away from moving maximum, because they only move a lot shorter.
Yeah, okay.
And unfortunately, some of those throw rolls, the rock throws, were just complete fluff.
Yeah, your shooting was pretty abysmal. If you would hit, you wouldn't wound, and that would be if you hit, and it was pretty rare.
I was trying to, there's not a lot of shooting, and I think for me, you just had the bodies, you had the threats, and I didn't have the tools to throw rocks behind your boys to disarm those key heroes that were casting the spells, that were chanting the prayers. They were just
and that's the thing, the redundancy with the war dogs as well. They've got that double up of the prayers or the dancers or whatever they're called, that can give +1 save, and then the other dude's got a spell that can give another +1 save. Like the prayers don't stack, but they stack differently. And then I think that double move fly spell. Like I never got the triple off, unfortunately. Like I think
We didn't need it in the end. I think
it would have been a bit of insult to injury if that was the case, to be honest. But it was good. Like I really like the list. There's only like a few tweaks here and there. I think it can actually happen. But I mean,
I think it's interesting for me because when the book very first came out, no one talked Big War. It was always about Iron Jaws and it was always about the Bone Splitters.
Yeah.
And in the last 6 to 9 months, people have started to unlock it, and you're starting to see this really nice blend of the both.
Yeah, the boys down in Vicky GT were the reason I got that idea. Like I played one of the boys down there, and he pulled it off seamlessly. I was like, obviously that's the next progression in the evolution of this this journey that I'm sort of on with this book. But it's definitely interesting. I'd be interested to see how maybe 2 units of big stabbers work. But then the thing is, they're not always recommended. Like they're not always going to do that much damage, that D6 damage when there's no monsters on the field. And it's that last couple 100 points. I'm still not 100% on that list, but it's getting to that almost peak. I think
it's good that you can respond to the meta at least. That if you are going into a monster meta and there's a lot of Archeons, like I know this tournament has a lot of Archeons.
Yeah, I mean this is a special snowflake sort of tournament though, isn't it? That's definitely a reason to bring them for sure. I think even with the tech list, like the actual meta that we've got going on, not just this nonsense, but like we got spell doms that are going on that are so just burning those wild points, having the idol nearby, like you can get those pluses to cast those spells to get your boys up the field. Like you're not really relying on, like obviously you got the auto dispel that goes off.
There's a lot of guarantees in Big War. I think there's a lot of risk mitigation by if you get those points early, you can really bring down your hitting and your wounding. You can get the movement. There's just a lot of guarantees, but it's about getting the wild points early. In order to just like throw yourself at your opponent. I think we got to 16 wild points turn 1, and it was like 24, 22, 24 turn 2, and then
turn 3
I
capped out at 30, and I ended up blowing it on trying to take down that last Mega Garg. Unfortunately, the piggies had to do the job, but still they did the trick. They put in work. Pretty good.
No, look, it's good. It was a perfect matchup, and I think about what I could have done differently, and I truly don't know what I could have done differently. There was still little micro moments, but I don't know if there was a lot that I could have done to swung the game in my favor. Like, could I? I gave away first turn priority. Could I have charged you? Maybe, but I feel like you would have had some really good responses if I went up in your face.
I think the play to let me go first was obviously the right call, because then you have the double to work with if you get it.
And I didn't get it.
And you didn't
I didn't get any doubles.
But I think it was still the right choice to get. Like obviously relying on a double turn isn't optimum, but if it's going to heavily favour you, then definitely go for it. Especially with me. Only one thing can do that leap, what the Rogue Idol did, as you saw. Even in Ulgu, I would need to waste the move on double moving the hero, like double running them with the what's it called, Mighty Destroyers.
Yes.
To even attempt that, and then I'm burning the CP as well. And as we spoke about, like on the show, like CP management in this Big War is just crazy.
There's a lot of resources between the Big War point, your CP management, and there's so many things that want that CP. It's like when do you pull the trigger? But the fact that you've got so many options is also a benefit.
Yeah, and like you saw through there, you kept asking like, am I going to use?
That's all right.
Am I going to use a CP to reroll hits or to reroll saves? And there were so many times where I wanted to, because I know you hit like a truck. I was like, if I do that and then something goes amiss, like I don't have a CP for Battle Shock, and that was more important than like doing the damage.
And that's why I was trying to throw rocks at those, and I failed horribly, because I'm hoping that if I could force you to use your CP early, or if I could, if you ignored your Inspiring Presence because you needed it for something else, then I could get the attrition of those double wounded battle line troops, or even your piggies, I could lose more. I could burn more, but just didn't. The play didn't come off. But you played a good game. You played probably a flawless game for what was in front of you.
Yeah, thanks, man. As we spoke about before, like, I'd be interested to see how we match up when it's not so skewed odds. But it was definitely good. Thank you for the game.
Good talented player with the right list at the right time. Like, you can't ask for any more. Hopefully you get much more monsters, the stabby with those.
A couple Archaons would be good.
Ooh, I'd love to see you stab Archaon with a with some 4 big stabbers.
Yeah.
I'd love to see you bring him down.
I'll drop the wire on that too. Oh my god.
You just throw everything, just like who cares? Just like take him down.
Yeah. If he's off the table, they've lost. That's half their army, you know.
Thanks, Hoops.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Cool. So as I mentioned, I'm now on 1 victory, 1 loss. So I'm heading into round 3 with against Blades of Corn. So I was up against Seth. Seth's in the white shirt, not the gentleman in the beanie. Seth, I had the pleasure of playing his partner at a teams tournament a few years ago, Monica, who's very lovely. So I got to play Seth as well. So Seth was playing his Reapers of Vengeance. Ironic that I had just done a video with Mark Wildman about Corn and Reapers of Vengeance. So I knew what I was in for, and knife to the heart was the battle plan. In addition, we were going to play Defenders and Headhunter secondaries. So this one for me was, I was relatively confident, but it would depend on where the doubles might come in, who does the damage, and how Seth would play the summoning. I thought this one for me, especially with the ability to kick the objective around the table, might work in my favor, but it was not an auto guaranteed win. So for me, I was worried about Archaon. By the way, I'd already fought in Nagash. Now I'm facing one of the 10 Archaons. So I decided to give away the first turn, and Seth had moved his force up. His whole block of army had moved forward. Archaon, the Bloodthirster, all the troops, everyone just kind of moved forward to try to eventually go for my 1 home objective. In response, I would throw some rocks at the Blood Reavers and the Doggos in an attempt to thin them down, but I didn't want to destroy them. And the reason I didn't want to destroy them was because when the unit is destroyed in a Khorne army, they get their blood tie, and their blood tie points would allow them to summon more bodies later, or it would allow them to do certain abilities. So for me, I wanted to reduce the units and bring them down as much as possible without causing a battle shock or ultimately destroying them. I won the priority going into turn 2, and I decided to again give it to Seth, knowing that I could automatically win the game from turn 3 if we held both of the objectives. I thought it was a bit of a gamble, but I was relatively confident I could handle giving away the second turn. And that's what happened. So I gave it to Seth, and I was hoping that he wouldn't be able to do too much damage. And he got Archaon in, and off the back of a charge, and he basically almost killed. So Archaon charged, and using Reapers of Vengeance, he was able to double pile in, so do an immediate second pile in, so 2 rounds of combat, and would essentially do, I think it was 27 points of damage against the Kraken Eater from a double pile in. So that was almost enough to pull down the Kraken, which was really concerning. So in response, I had to get the Kraken out. So I did some damage, obviously, in the combat previous. So I tried to beat down Archaon a little bit, and I got the Kraken the hell out of there. I wanted it out of combat. I wanted to retreat it onto the home objective. It would be supported by the unit of 3 Man Crushers that I would need later, but I needed to deal with Archaon, and I knew there was a Bloodthirster coming. So I'd charge my non-general Gatebreaker into combat with Archaon, and I had a triumph. So I was on 1950. So I got the triumph for every single game, which was really helpful, especially like when you're getting rerolls to hit or rerolls to wounds. Not rerolling ones, it's rerolling all hits. So it's really helpful. And I charged that Mega Gargan in, did some mortal wounds on the charge. In addition, with the triumph to reroll all hits, I was able to pull down Archaon between like throwing rocks at him from the Man Crushers and not the Kraken Eater, but the Man Crushers, and everyone threw rocks at Archaon, got in, and I was essentially able to remove Archaon by the end of turn 2. So that threat was gone, but turn 3, Seth was still coming for me. There was still a bloodthirster to come. There was still a whole bunch of bodies, and while this was all happening, I had my Gatebreaker General to the flank going for his objective. So I thought, as much as he was putting pressure on me, I would try to put pressure on him. And my Gatebreaker couldn't get into combat, but I was setting up for a turn 3 or a turn 4. And Seth knew that, and he put his Demon Prince down to... He applied an ability that meant that everything within 18 inches, or any enemy within 18 inches, would halve the charge and the run roll, which essentially means that, even with a 3-inch charge, it would still mean that I'd have to roll like a 7 to make it successful. So he had some good potentials, but there was a gap opened up because he kind of overcommitted on my objective. Anyway, turn 3, as I mentioned, I won the priority, and I charged that Gatebreaker into the objective where he had some Blood Reavers. And I knew that if I could hit that charge, I'd be within 6 inches of the objective, and I'd be able to retain and automatically win. And that's essentially what happened. Despite the Demon Prince trying to block me off, I think he used the Reapers to pile in and try to do some damage, but it just wasn't enough to pull down that Mega. The Mega responded by doing some damage, but ultimately I was able to claim the opponent's objective as much as retaining mine. So I got the major victory on that one, and I would end the day on 2 wins and 1 loss. Here's what Seth had to say about the game.
All right, so I'm here with my opponent from round 3. It is Seth, and you were playing Blades of Corn.
Yes.
Ironic, because we just did a battle report, or actually a Talking Corn, just before this event. So, and ironically enough, it was Reapers of Vengeance too, and we were talking about Archaon, and
Yes.
what did you take?
So I took Archaon, Reapers of Vengeance. As said, we had Thirster with its 6-inch pile-in. Pretty much everything in the list was to buff Archaon in some way. So I was spending about 1,000 plus points on that. So I had the Slaughter Priest +1 save. I had the +3 to run and charge from the Stoker. I had a Demon Prince that was giving me a way to guarantee myself essentially the charge by basically giving me a perpetual half run and charge bubble around my castle.
That was good. By the way, so we were playing Knife to the Heart. So depending on how the game was going to go, I think, I was in a really good spot that if I could get a Mega Gargan who's going to be quite fast onto that objective in turn 3. Unfortunately, it's one of those scenarios where you win automatically if you hold both. And being a Gargan, I can sit on my own quite easily. But then turn 2 happened, and Archaon did 50 odd damage to 2 Megas.
About 55, I think.
Yeah, you went in. You explain what happened.
Yes, well, so I basically used every single aggressive tool I had.
You had 5 CP to start with, I think it was.
Yeah, so we basically passed turn 1 off, which gave me quite a lot of CP heading into turn 2. And I basically was able to use my Stoker along with the 6-inch pile-in of the Thirster and the auto-run command ability to advance my Archaon 23 inches across the table, which was already quite far into the middle of the table by that point.
Super far. I was shitting myself.
Because of that aspect, I was able to actually push quite far into the board, even though Anthony had backlined quite a distance too. And using the 6-inch pile-in, I was able to effectively run and charge. It's almost there. And so I got into not only the Kraken Eater for the front line, I also managed to be able to pile into the Gatebreaker as well.
Yeah, my non-general Gatebreaker was just like this big slab of meat. And I thought I could handle it. I'm like, yeah, look, it's 1,000 points, there's 70 wounds of these Gargants. It should be all right.
Well, yeah, so obviously we hit in. I threw everything I got into the first Kraken Eater. I thought I would be able to kill him potentially in 1 round of combat.
8 wounds left, I think it was. Like you did like 27.
8 wounds left.
There was like 27 damage. There was like 8 wounds left, and I'm like, oh, he'll survive. He'll be all right.
So I managed to get that 8 wounds, which was good.
Wrong. He piled in again, and I killed it.
And so Reapers of Vengeance, Chaos buff gives to demons only. So Archaon unfortunately has the demon keyword for Anthony, so I was able to double pile in, and he can activate it on himself, so I didn't need to be near anyone else. and double piled in, killed the obvious Kraken Eater, which I really needed to get rid of because of that kicking the objective away. I was waiting for the kick off the table.
And I kicked the objective backwards. So knowing that
I was stressing really hard about
that. Like I did a decent kick, but like I kicked it backwards, so it just made it a little bit harder for. But I kicked it backwards as opposed to what other Gargants might do is like kick it forward as your force advances. But knowing I needed to keep a gap from Archaon and your Bloodthirsters.
Yeah,
just keep pushing back as much as possible.
That was kind of what incentivized me initially to push forward in the first place. So as soon as you kicked at 7 and I had this sudden realization, hey, this actually starts pretty close to the board edge, I knew that there was this very real threat of you pushing straight off the edge of the board if I had not gone in. And that stress was starting to grow in me as I realized, hey, wait, if I physically don't have a win condition, I'm not going to have enough bodies to last 3 Mega Gargants, let alone your massive hammer sitting behind them.
And that's what I was trying. I was throwing rocks at the Reavers,
to bring me down.
To try to bring. And I know you could summon, but I knew that I wasn't going to give you many summoning points.
No, yeah.
So the more threats I could remove,
of course.
Like.
Well, that was it, right? I had limited numbers, and I was always going to have limited numbers in that situation. And you were counting for 90 models almost, I think.
There was like 20, and then 30 if we counted like the bubble. Like I had 1,500 points trying to defend.
You had a lot on that objective, and so my only way was to really kill you off. And so I pushed forward. I knew I had to kill the Kraken Eater as soon as possible because one more turn of you kicking that objective was the game over essentially. So I managed to get that Kraken Eater, and I got about halfway through your Gatebreaker.
I think you got 20 out of 35, so
it was pretty close. And because of that, I was feeling pretty confident. The only thing that stressed me out a little bit was this concept of priority. Losing it twice in a row was scary to say the least.
So I won priority turn 1. So, I outdropped, so I gave it away.
Yeah.
I won priority turn 2, and I gave it away.
Yeah.
And I know you had some thoughts. You're like, oh, maybe that was the wrong move.
Yeah.
And then the reason I did that is because I was hoping for the 2 into the 3, which is actually what I got.
Which is exactly what you got, which was probably the toughest thing for me was when I won that turn 2 and I was in turn 2 and I had that advantage of winning ties and the averages were in my favor. I decided to push very aggressive and not necessarily, I guess, leave no defenses, but I used my Demon Prince to basically make it so that way there's no physical way for you on your turn to reach anything close to my objective. Because I made sure that you were, with your 12-inch move, 7 away from everything, or 6 away from everything, and the Demon Prince halving your charges meant that was feasibly impossible for you to reach.
I had, straight up, I had a Hail Mary.
Yeah,
you made probably one big gap, which was moving the Reavers to the side.
Yes, so I did that.
And like any sports fan would know, there was like a Hail Mary that I won the priority. There was a gap that I had to go for. If I failed one of the two, I failed the priority, or if I failed the charge roll, being that I was halving the charge and run rolls.
Well, so it was even a 6-inch charge with that.
And I had to get a good charge roll because even hitting 3 was
even
like
hitting minimum was not enough.
Well, I might have hit the combat, but I may not have got the objective. And because you had the Demon Prince swing in, I needed something quite high, and the Hail Mary worked.
Yeah.
But one of those two things failing, I would have lost in turn 3.
Yeah. No. Well, so that was kind of the idea, was to win that average roll, which I was playing for, and I didn't leave myself that backup plan of moving the Reavers to cover that gap just in case. I really played into that average, and it was my mistake, and I kind of, as soon as you won the priority, I was like, I realized my mistake immediately because it wasn't a difficult gap to cover either.
No. And if you won the priority, you could have summoned to bring more bodies to screen.
Well, so there was plethora of things that kind of put basically the win in my hands potentially on that that specific turn 3 if I had gotten priority. Mainly being able to have Archaon live and push into the fight when I die, as well as being able to use my 4 Blood Tithe points to not only hit you in your turn, but also potentially screen off if I needed to. And not being able to do that kind of was where that sort of fell apart, and I wish I had moved those Reavers and just kind of blocked up, because I would have been able to buy myself an extra turn.
You could have screened me and stopped me, and then then you got a counter attack, summon a Bloodthirster, or bring in the other Bloodthirster. There's things.
Well, I was trying to bring in dogs mainly because they're just another wave for you to get through, and my thought process was, if I give you enough waves, you won't be able to get through them enough. And when I saw all my bodies, I was hoping that if I didn't kill your army in that turn, because you did have so many wounds still sitting on there, it was about 35 wounds or something, at the very least, I wouldn't have been able to get through them with just the Thirster and just a couple of guys. So I was hoping to hold up that last Gatebreaker, the General, using basically my entire army, and then make it so you can't flee with the Whip, because the Lash of Khorne allows me to do that, and I could have kept him at a rather safe distance to basically perpetuate that for as long as I can.
It would have gone to turn 5. It
would have pushed as long as I could to tie it up at the very worst case scenario. So
no, look, Seth, it was a cool game.
It was.
Like, Knights of the Hearts is one of those funny ones that if you get the right conditions going into the auto win, it just stops. But I think we could have punched on in the middle of board for the full 5 rounds, and it would have easily been would have gone back and forth. But it was just one of those unfortunate win conditions that.
Well, it's very difficult, especially I think I had a lot to push uphill, but I tried my best, and I did my best effort as I could. I've made mistakes. I mean, it's my 5th game playing the army, so
you did well,
the
man.
fact that I managed to get that far was at least something.
You did well, man. You did well, and in a different mission, you're probably in a different situation. But like we just had Hoops on, in the last one. Hoops just absolutely destroyed me. I could have called it in. Honestly, I could have called it in round 1. Like, it was that bad, but. Look, just like monster hunting with monsters. It was just like, but
it's the army made for
sometimes they fall in your favor, sometimes they don't fall in your favor. It's just gotta roll with the punches. But
exactly.
Seth, thank you very much. Let's wrap this up. Good luck for the rest of the event.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
So as I mentioned, I'm now on 2 wins, 1 loss, and I'm real. I wouldn't say top tables, but I'm certainly up there in the top, challenging for. It's still 4-1 was possible. 5-0 was certainly out of the picture. And I was up against Chris Wilcox and his Seraphon's Fangs of Sotek. The secondaries were the Defenders and the Headhunters. And if you do the maths, guys, there is 135 skinks. Now, the challenge here is that I was playing Scorched Earth. And as you know, that there are 4 home objectives and 4 opponent objectives. There's 8 objectives in total, and it's all about burning your opponents. So if you get more models or claim the objective at the end of the battle round or the end of your turn, you can burn your opponent. And one of the things that Chris had done, the tournament organizer Chris, not Chris Wilcox, is instead of in Scorched Earth, you would normally roll a D3 for the amount of victory points you would get from burning the objective. In Brizhammer, Chris Stratford, the TO, had said it's just a flat 2. So I do like that a little bit. It removes the variety or the swing. The last thing you want to do is burn an objective, get 1, but at the same time you don't get the dynamic swing. So pros and cons either way. But anyway, Chris had 135 skinks. He had teleporting. He had summoning. There was a lot of... I was concerned about this one because if he could take down the Mega Gargants, he had enough bodies. And the challenge with having 4 units and 8 objectives is I can't be everywhere. So if I sit on my home objective, I'm just going to get shot. If I go for my opponent's objectives, I will leave my home objectives vacant and I'll get burnt. So it was an interesting challenge. So anyway, come turn 1, I outdropped Chris. I gave away the first turn and Chris had moved up his skink force. And as I would expect from 135 skinks, he would shoot as many of those blowpipes at the man crushers as possible. I think it was on 6s they do mortal wounds in addition, in addition, not just instead of. And they ended up pulling down 1.5 of the small gargants. So I think Chris was very familiar that the small boys were the ones who do the most damage. And I would respond in my turn by charging the Gatebreaker General into the block of skinks. Challenge was that Chris had put down a debuff to make that General -1 to hit. And in addition, the skinks can shoot when they're charged. And on a 3+ with a skink priest, I think it is, they can, on a 3+, they can, or 4+, they can retreat when they've been charged. So when I charged, there was a good chance that I wouldn't actually even get into combat. And fascinating. A really tough matchup. So anyway, got into combat. I think I did some damage, but unfortunately, I only killed 23 of the 30 skinks. That -1 to hit really hurt me. And in addition to the fact that skinks don't have an armor save of 4+, and the reason that's important is the allegiance ability that I had gives me a +1 to hit when I'm fighting against a unit with a 1, 2, 3, or 4 up armor save. So not only did I lose my allegiance ability there, but I also then had a -1 to hit from a spell. So I think most of my attacks were hitting on like 5. So lucky to get the 23 out of the 30, but an inspiring presence meant that my Gargant was stuck in combat with 7 idiot skinks. Come priority round, turn 2, and we both rolled a 1. Yep, we both rolled the 1. So that meant Chris held onto the priority, and as expected, Seraphon just threw down more mortal wounds, chipping at those Gargants through all the blowpipes attacks. And in addition, he would drop down 3 units of chameleon skinks in the backfield. All it took was a 1-inch gap to drop those boys in the backfield. He was right on the table edge, and then just continue to use those chameleon skinks as well to shoot at the man crushers as well. So it did pull down a man crusher, so I was down to only 1 left in addition to the 3 big boys. And then the other blocks of skinks would just shoot at my general with like 1,000,000 blowpipe attacks, and it left my general on 1 wound. So things are not looking good so far. I thought I had enough damage output to respond, but it seemed like the dice gods went out for a smoko, and in response, I fluffed like literally all of my attacks. I think it was horrendous. I'm not blaming the dice. It's just statistically really unlikely. So, but the irony is that will turn in the next game. So know that I had some unlucky dice rolls. Turn 3 came about, and the dice gods were still on a smoko break because I fluffed even more attacks. The Mega Gargant that went into the skinks did very little damage, but it was enough to cap the objective. My Kraken Eater went into the chameleon skinks with the other single man crusher left, and we didn't even kill I don't think we killed the 3 units. I think most of them were left on like 1 wound. I think maybe we killed 1 of the 3 units, but splitting out the attacks, there was still some chameleon skinks still left. And Chris responded by obviously killing the general who was only on 1 wound left, and then repositioning his force to start defending the objective. So some teleporting shenanigans, and the chameleon skinks were starting to push onto my home objectives, and he was repositioning his big blocks of skinks to defend his objectives. Moving into turn 4, I lost the priority roll, but my Gatebreaker was basically a pincushion. Like he just, again, more shooting, and it was those chip damage that, you know, the Gatebreakers only have a 4-up armor save. There's no real way to increase the armor save, and there's only so many damage 1 attacks that you can save, and that was really what was happening. It was just this attrition and weight of dice that was just bringing down my boys. and my Kraken Eater was kicking around its home objective, and I think it was sitting or trying to defend 2 objectives with 1 model. It was trying to defend against a couple of chameleon skinks, and I think there was a skink priest coming towards me, but in turn there was a block of skinks moving up the board. So it was trying to do its best it can to kind of defend its home objectives, while I had a gatebreaker challenging his force, which is why he was repositioning that I decided to not engage into combat in my turn 4, because if I could set up a Hail Mary and step over the terrain piece and hit a charge onto his little buff unit of characters, there was a little bit of a hole. It would be enough to actually win the game. We worked out the maths, but unfortunately, come turn 5, I lost the priority, which meant more skink shoots. And, you know, between the mortal wounds and the regular damage as well, the magic damage and things like that, it didn't kill the gatebreaker that was challenging the home objectives, but it did degrade its profile significantly, that it made that job harder to challenge the objective because its movement had degraded quite significantly. In response, I moved in. I was able to swing my Kraken Eater into the opponent's Chris's one of his objectives, which would get me close to winning the game. And then it was all up to the Kraken Eater, and I failed. What I needed was a 7-inch charge. I think I rolled a 5, which meant that I had to charge the skinks, and I couldn't seize the objective. And as you already mentioned, charging the skinks meant that it triggered mortal wounds, or they would shoot at me, and it was enough to pull down that last gatebreaker. And unfortunately, still a lot of damage that the boys suffered, and the Seraphon won that one 23-21. So I'm now currently on 2-2. This is what Chris had to say.
All right, so I'm here with my round 4 opponent, Chris. Mate, I put a photo up on Twitter about all your skinks and like, oh, this man's a good man. Oh, make sure you treat him well. And mate, you got a bit of a fan following. I don't know if you know this. I know you're not on Twitter, but the peeps love you. But this is 135 skink Chris.
It is Chris with 135 skinks, yes.
So I've told everyone how I thought the match went. What was your take of the match? We were playing Scorched Earth, so you had a lot of bodies on the table. I don't know, you've had experience with Gargants before, so it wasn't a surprise. What was your strategy, and what worked and what didn't work?
Well, the strategy at the start was really to hold mine and see what you did. Obviously, you gave me first turn, so I buffed up a bit of magic, a little bit of shooting, which I probably shouldn't have advanced that unit. Ended up just killing 1 giant. After that, it was basically reacting to you, knowing that you really can't leave your objectives, and even if you come and crush the ones on my wing like you did with only 20 skinks there, you're leaving yours behind. And then I'm obviously using my free teleport to come and equal the score and then advance the score as your giants were getting toppled. But it was like a major worry from the start, as I've played Gargants before and I've left so many of them on 1 wound, as you found out yourself.
Yeah, right at the end.
Left on 1 wound. So it's, you know, when they got 35 wounds and you leave them with 1, it's like, oh, he's just going to pile through. But unfortunately, you know, you didn't get a double turn at probably the critical moment. You did get 1, but not because skinks were left fighting him, so he was.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
that was the big thing in that battle was those. About 10 skinks left out of the 30, and then you reduce them down to about 7, and then
I couldn't hit for my life. I couldn't hit.
Yeah, dice were not kind to you today, and also by putting the -1 on, and then at the critical turn, I was left with 1 skink alive.
Yeah,
and that probably cost you the battle. That 1 skink. No, because he comes into my other skinks, he's doing damage, and you're still coming around the other side of the other big guy.
Only problem though is that 1 Gargant was still on 1 wound, so it would be the same outcome. And I think that's the challenge, right? For me was 1, you had the teleports, 2, you had the summoning, 3, you had the chameleon skinks, 4, I want to charge you, and when I charge you, I get hit with mortal wounds, and you retreat. And if I just stand there, I just get shot and take mortal wounds. So it was a bit of a. Like you had a lot of utility, and the scenario really played in your favour.
Well, the scenario is definitely in my favour. As I said, when I played them before, with Giants being able to kick objectives into my department and score more points. That's how I've lost previously to Giants. So this one with the 8s means you were stretched. Obviously, right from the start, you've got 6 models covering 4 foot of board.
Well, 4 units really, because there's 6. The 3 models are actually 1 unit. So losing 1 just made it really hard. But you played a good game. You stretched it. We went to round 5. We went to the very end. I had a Hail Mary that would have won the game if it went well, but the Hail Mary didn't go to plan.
Yeah. Oh, well, he never made it in, so I never saw how many skinks he was going to kill.
Well, I didn't even want to hit the skink. So the moment we're talking about is right at the end. I'd stepped over the one of the terrain pieces, and I wanted to charge the heroes, but keep outside of the skinks with the charge, and that would have still kept me within 6 to score the objective without engaging the skinks, which was possible because there was a little gap.
There was a little gap. I guess it would have come down to how many skinks were within 6 and my other characters.
Well, that would be the question, and we'd have to work that out. But unfortunately, I didn't hit the charge even with the reroll. Well, I hit the charge, but only got the skinks, not the characters.
Yeah.
So it was just like blowpipes, game over. The opportunity wasn't there. I got 50% of it. I got 1 of the 2, but not 2 of the 2.
Yeah. And I probably made a mistake in that last turn by not trying to. The giant that did come around and charge, and by not getting my skinks far enough up, I should have run them, not shot, to keep it probably further away. And the skinks on the far flank as well should have ran. Just tried to close the gap a little bit. And
game shouldn't be won on a Hail Mary anyway. So no, it was a good game. Unfortunately, just a tough matchup for me. You got round 5. We don't know what's coming up. We got focal points, I think it is. So
I'm in trouble. Anybody's got a behemoth, I'm in trouble.
Well.
If I can't get it out early.
Is there someone here on this video that's running behemoths? Chris, all the best. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for the game.
Hopefully we'll see each other again, and maybe even for fantasy battle games.
Oh, I haven't played those for years.
Yeah, I've been a little bit of 6. I've been a little bit of 6 on the side.
Oh, have you on the side? No, I've gone really to Kings of War on the fantasy side.
We're going to talk about that. This is an AOS channel. Ignore that guy. Block him out. All right. Good luck, everybody. Game 5. Wish me well.
All right.
So I'm currently at 2-2, and I saw the matchup for game 5. It was against Focal Point. It was Daughters of Cain Calibron, so a bit of teleport shenanigans. Not nearly as bad as the old Calibron, but still Calibron nonetheless. And I was up against a player that I absolutely have never played, but I was really excited to play. And that's Matcap, one of the handsomest mans in Warhammer, but more importantly, just a really, really, really good dude. And I got to play another superhero. So I'd already played Archaon. I had already played Nagash. Now I'm up against Morathi. All I needed was Teclis and Gordrak or some other god. And, I hit the Alariel, but I would have hit the trifecta. So I'm up against Matt Gammy. It's the secondaries are Cornered and Assassinate. And I looked at this list, and much like the Nagash battle, I knew that the key was going to be ignoring Morathi to as much as you can ignore Morathi, knowing that Morathi can only take 3 points of damage in every turn. It meant that I had to just whittle down and remove those Sisters of Slaughter, remove the Chariot or the Cauldron of Blood, remove the bodies, because Morathi couldn't do it on her own. And if I could just do 3 damage consistently, I'd be able to pull her down as a key threat. So I outdropped Gammy, and I gave away. So I actually gave away every turn 1 because I thought the double would always be valuable. So I've given away the first turn, and Matt has used his Morathi Calibron shenanigans, and in addition to a cracking charge roll with Morathi, who had Mind Razor on her, so it was making her attacks like Ren 3, got Morathi into combat, which was a scary prospect. And Morathi had charged into the Gatebreaker General, I think it was. Anyway, so while that was all happening, Matt had moved his Sisters of Slaughter and the Cauldron into the middle of the board to start scoring those additional points. And as I mentioned, Morathi had Mind Razor, and she ended up doing like 20 damage to my Gatebreaker General, who had a 6-up ward save or a 6-up damage prevention roll after that, which was a bit nasty. But anyway, Morathi did damage, and I responded. I did my 3 attacks, or my 3 damage. And in response, in my turn, I got that Mega Gargant the F out of there. I knew that Morathi would just pull it down, and I couldn't handle losing bodies. So in response, I had moved a different Mega Gargant who was currently healed up to deal with Morathi, and we threw some rocks. Actually, I think we threw some rocks, and we did enough damage in our rock throwing that we didn't have to engage her in response. While this was all happening, I moved my Man Crushers and another Gatebreaker towards that center block of the Cauldron and the 20 Sisters of Slaughter. They charged. They did a bunch of mortal wounds on the charge. I think they did like 7 or 8 mortal wounds on the charge. They went into the Cauldron of Blood. The Gatebreaker went into the Sisters of Slaughter, and by the end of turn 1, we had cleared both the Cauldron and we cleared both the 20 Sisters of Slaughter with very little damage back. So there was a massive hole in the middle, and I think that surprised Gammy how quickly the Man Crushers could move, because they can run and charge if they're within 12 of a Mega Gargant in the charge phase. So for those guys, that slingshot, I sacrificed the shooting attack, but in return, between the mortal wounds on the charge, the piling in and stuffing in the pants or the bag on a 2+, it worked quite well. I would then win the double. So I'd win the double and I'd get the priority roll in turn 2. And I would just use that big block in the middle to continue its charge. So the Man Crushers and the Gatebreaker would then just go into another block of Sisters of Slaughter and the Blade Coven. So Morgraith was not with the Blade Coven, but they were all kind of batched up together trying to protect one of the other objectives. And between the rock throwing at Morathi, we had kind of brought her down by the end of turn 2 down to 3 wounds left. So we cleared those Sisters of Slaughter and the Blade Coven, and I was starting to score big points. And in response, Gammy retreated or got Morathi out, and there was a Man Crusher after all these attacks. There was one Man Crusher left on 2 wounds. So Morathi's gone in and tried to charge that lone Man Crusher. So 2 wounds left on the Man Crusher, 3 wounds left on Big Morathi, the Shadow Queen. Sorry, I should be saying Big Morathi, Shadow Queen. And she fluffed. She completely fluffed. I've never seen this in my life. He's rolled 6 attacks with Heartrender and landed 1 wound. And ironically enough, I saved it. There was no Mind Razor, so no, it wasn't even. No, he fluffed all the Heartrender attacks. It was one of like the Snakehead or some other damage, like rend 1 damage, as opposed to the Heartrender, because I wouldn't get a save on that one. But anyway, it was just a crazy failure on the Shadow Queen. It was like a 1 in a million chance, unfortunately. Brought down the Canary Heartrenders to start putting pressure and start doing some chip damage on my boys and start pushing me out. The speed of the Heartrenders would mean that if I start pushing forward to his objectives, he could start scoring my home objectives or other objectives with the Canary. And obviously Morathi probably should have taken down that Man Crusher. Turn 3, I lost the priority, but ultimately the damage had been done. I think what was left on the table after a bunch of responses was Morgraith. And, oh, by the way, the Man Crusher, that Man Crusher on 2 damage had actually pulled down the Shadow Queen. So there was no Morathi on the table. Now, turn 3, all that was left was like Morgraith with the Sisters of Slaughter. There was like a unit of 10 or 20 Sisters of Slaughter. There might have been like 1 Canary, and the lead and the challenge as well with focal points is that I get an additional 1 for having behemoths. So my lead was just too high on this one, which is ironic because in the game previously, Chris Wilcox was getting extra points for being battle line. No, it was heroes. It was heroes within 6 inches. So he was able to score some additional points that really worked against me. In this scenario, it actually worked in my favor. But ultimately, the game against Gammy, it was just losing the Cauldron and then Morathi so quickly meant that it was just too hard to come back, and I would win that game 20-11.
All right, so I'm with my final opponent. It is the sexiest man in Warhammer, 3 years running, officially ranked on our match play. Thanks, Clint, for tracking that. It is Matt Gammy. You've probably seen him on the channel as well. Has done Bone Splitters.
Yep.
And Bone Splitters.
Lots of Bone Splitters.
Maybe another Bone Splitters talk.
Yeah, nearly 3.
But you weren't running Bone Splitters. You were running the Daughters of Cain. And for me, it was really interesting because it's the army that I'm going to start next. So it was interesting to watch how Gammy moved his army and used it and how he responded to my army. So I might ask you, how did it go for you? What was in your thoughts? What worked, what didn't work? Like, give me the rundown.
Cool. So basically, with the mission being focal points, I figured had to put the pressure on early, try and get Morathi where she needed to be, try and clear one of the Mega Gargants off early. Didn't go the way that I needed it to, but that's okay. Then I underestimated the speed of the Gigantes, the giant Gigantes.
Is that the first time you've played Gargants?
It is, yes. Yeah. First time played Gargants. I love their combos for the damage output that they do. And what I would say is that with that underestimation, I probably could have screened off a bit better.
Because it's not me being like a gotcha moment. You tell an opponent that your Gargants can run and charge, your man crushers. And in your mind, like, how do you perceive that? Because a lot of people do the same thing. Like, they always say to me, I'm surprised how quick the Gargants are.
In my mind, I guess you look at the size of the Gargants and you think, okay, maybe a 12-inch move or around that speed sort of thing. And I think, yeah, that eye that you try and get in to see if you can get that distance, it was just a bit of a shock to see Mega Gargant and 3 Man Crushers in the same time. It's one of those things. I think with the focal points, I wanted to try and keep the middle objective because I figured that would be bleeding points for me. And with the double turn, I think that really put me on the back foot for you being able to push into my objectives on my side to get those extra points. Obviously, getting double down on points with the Gargants was always a nice bonus for you as well. So I was trying to, use Morathi as my buffer. I knew I was taking three wounds a turn. So I was thinking by turn 2, if she's alive, that's a good thing. If I can at least clear off one of the Mega Gargants, I can. I pulled some special tricks to try and snipe off the last one of the Mega Gargants that was on 1 wound that had retreated out of combat with Morathi. But even having Morathi in combat, it's a nice little combo that I can do with the Slaughter Queen and the Morathi's command ability as well to get a double piling in the hero
that
phase.
caught me off guard because I remember old Daughters. I was very familiar with the Morathi trick in Calibron.
Yes.
And how you got Morathi in a combat turn 1. I was confident that you wouldn't, but pleasantly surprised to see Morathi in combat.
Yeah.
So I wasn't too aggressive with my deployment, but I was probably. And your charge roll wasn't even that hot.
No,
it was like a 5 or a 6. So even if I screened backwards, there was and you got a really good charge, you still would have got into combat first turn. So I was pleasantly surprised as a Morathi soon-to-be player.
Yes, yeah. She definitely has the move to be where she needs to be. I think she really stuffed herself up in turn 3 or bottom of turn 2 actually. So it was, I figured she could clear at least 1 Man Crusher, which she failed.
Man Crusher on 10 wounds.
Yep.
And Heart Render with 6 attacks. Hit how many?
Hit 4 times, wounded 0 times.
That was, I talked in the last game, I was looking for a Hail Mary. That was my Hail Mary save. I like you would assume that 2 wounds would go, and I know I'm like rubbing salt right now, but it was just statistically 1 in a million probably that Morathi fails a Heart Render and doesn't do 2 wounds.
Yeah, and when you're playing the strategy of Morathi can get in, clear a Man Crusher, because we spoke about she was in range to try and clear off one of the other Mega Gargants. But with 3 wounds left, I figured if I can get into one of the man crushers, hopefully survive the fall and win that dice roll off, I could at least try and have a double turn, which I did end up winning the double turn, but I couldn't really do much with what I had left. It would have been nicer as well if Marathi had have cleared off that objective. I probably would have got a little bit more of an opportunity to play around with the canary, because I think the canary as a option to drop down would have been really nice. But it's one of those ones where I think the mission itself is tough.
It was. If I lost this game, outside of a couple of matchups, this game was mine to lose.
Yes.
And that's not about me versus Gammy. It's just that my army is, every time I hold an objective, I'm getting 1 bonus point. So if I get 3 objectives, that's 3 VP, let alone the additional in the center, let alone, it's just a nightmare for you.
Yeah, and it's hard when you're bleeding victory points quite early, and then the double turn, so turn 2, I really was on the back foot victory points wise, and I just knew, he even moved off the middle objective, and I thought, okay, perfect, here's my chance, but it's still, that would have been nice to have Marathi get me 3 points there as well, so, just enough to kind of get up in points in that space, but, it was a good game. You played it really well, you knew your army, you knew where you needed to be and what you needed to hit. I would say Daughters, the old list, it's essentially an old build, the go-to build that I'm running that would have been in the last book very competitive. I still think it has its play. I still think it's got the nice movement shenanigans, but as we were talking about, the decision in temples is something that I'm still deciding on. Calibron is what I was running, so I thought maybe I could benefit from the neg one in shooting. It has not helped me at all this weekend. The teleport's nice, but I find that I've got the speed to be where I need to be. So,
and the final thing I'll say on this is, it probably doesn't help the fact that I've done so many discussions and I'm already planning for Daughters that I knew to take out the Cauldron as quick as possible. And most people would be worried about the Witch Elves or the Sisters of Slaughter or Marathi. And we were talking about the impacts of losing the Cauldron, then Marathi. If the Cauldron was still around, you had another big threat, and I think the game would have changed. If Marathi had Heartrender, the game would have changed. But the fact that you lost the Cauldron so early, then in conjunction you lost Marathi early, or early-ish, and then I got a double, it just meant that all things were kind of aligning to me. Where if one of those things didn't happen and the Cauldron's running around, that Man Crusher's gone. The other Gargans are being tied up from scoring those extra points. You then drop the Canary, and it's just one of those things, unfortunately.
So, good game. It was, sometimes it's dice games, so there's nothing I can do and turn around and, say, it's dice rolls, it's this, it's that. It is what it is, and it was a great game, and I enjoyed it. Good way to finish off the event as well.
Well, win, lose, or draw, I said to you right at the start, I've never played Matt. Matt's been on the channel for such a long time. We've dodged each other. We've been playing tournaments since 2017, so getting the opportunity to play the handsomest man of Warhammer, one of the nicest guys of Warhammer, has just ended my event on a high, so thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
And a COVID handshake.
Yeah, COVID handshake.
The only person at this event that I've shake the hands.
Dirty hands.
I don't want to touch these dirty Queenslanders, but Gammies deserves it. And everyone's walking past it probably gonna punch me after this.
Gonna punch me or roll me. It's fun.
Thank you again.
No, thank you. Awesome.
So now we've heard from Matt Gammy. How did I end? So I ended on 3 wins and 2 losses. That put me in the top third. So I think ultimately I landed 22nd out of the 60 odd, which was 3 wins and 2 losses. So that was a big pack that you can see here that were on 3 and 2. The thing that went really against me in this was that not being able to pick my secondaries. There was a few secondaries where they really went against me, and there were some things that either weren't achievable or I wouldn't have picked them. And a perfect example is when I played Ryan Hoops or Hooper, the 2 secondaries were just ones that I would never score in this particular army. And knowing the challenge, if I had chosen my secondaries, I certainly would have picked different ones. But it was out of my control, much like everyone in the pack. I probably could have scored more of those secondaries if they were in my favor. But anyway, ended 3-2. Which was a really enjoyable experience. It was great to test the Gargants, seeing that I just went 4-1, now going 3-2. Ironically enough, the 2 games that I dropped were both games that didn't have those mega heroes. So it was interesting learning that, the 2 games that I lost were were scenarios where I was just outswarmed. The 135 skinks, the big blocks of the Auric Savage boys, or the Auric boys, the Savage guys, with the additional damage. But yeah, either way, it was the swarms and the hordes and the speed and the chip damage that were kind of taking me out. So it was interesting to think what my army could do if it had a cheap screen. But ultimately, I had a great time with the Brizhammer crew. It was great to catch up with people that I hadn't seen for such a long time. Who won it? I think Hoops came second, the person that I lost to. I think he came second. Number one was a Fire Slayer's opponent. I can't remember the top three, but either way, it was a great field. And I hope you enjoyed this tournament recap. I think I'll play Suns maybe one more time. So I've got a tournament coming up in June that I think I will probably run it for Sydney Slaughter. And then at the end of Sydney Slaughter, I think I'll swap out to my Daughters of Cain in preparation for CanCon 2021. So, but who knows what the new General's Handbook and or AOS 3 is going to bring. We don't quite know. So I've also got a team event in November. So it's a 4-person teams event. So we're going to have to chat about which teams we're going to run. But that was my Brizhammer experience, and I hope you enjoyed this and learnt a little bit about like how my army was running. I hope you found that discussion valuable. If you did, give the video the old thumbs up. And if you have a comment or an insight, leave it in the comment section below. The champions over here are my AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members. So you guys are bloody legends. Thank you for all the support. If you want to know more about the support programs, the links are below down here in the episode description, along with a link to the Discord server, so we can continue this conversation. Until next time, don't forget to name your characters and have a good one.